Day 3, the 9th story of the Decameron. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Ruth Golding. The Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio, translated by J. M. Rigg. Day 3, the 9th story. Gilette of Narbon cures the King of France of a fistula, craves for spouse Bertrand Roussillon, who marries her against his will, and hies him in despite to Florence, where, as he courts a young woman, Gilette lies with him in her stead, and has 2 sons by him; for which cause he afterwards takes her into favour, and entreats her as his wife.
Lauretta's story being ended, and the Queen being minded not to break her engagement with Dioneo, it was now her turn to speak; wherefore, without awaiting the call of her subjects, thus with mien most gracious she began.
Now that we have heard Lauretta's story, who shall tell any to compare with it for beauty? Lucky indeed was it that she was not the first, for few that followed would have pleased, and so, I misdoubt me, 'twill fare ill with those that remain to complete the day's narration. However, for what it may be worth, I will tell you a story which seems to me germane to our theme. Know then that in the realm of France there was a gentleman, Isnard, Comte de Roussillon by name, who being in ill health, kept ever in attendance on him a physician, one Master Gérard of Narbonne. The said Count had an only son, named Bertrand, a very fine and winsome little lad, with whom were brought up other children of his own age, among them the said physician's little daughter Gilette, who with a love boundless and ardent out of all keeping with her tender years, became enamoured of this Bertrand. And so when the Count died, and his son, being left a ward of the king, must needs go to Paris, the girl remained beside herself with grief, and, her father dying soon after, would gladly have gone to Paris to see Bertrand, might she but have found a fair excuse. But no decent pretext could she come by, being left a great and sole heiress, and very closely guarded. So, being come of marriageable age, still cherishing Bertrand's memory, she rejected not a few suitors, to whom her kinsfolk would fain have married her, without assigning any reason. Now, her passion waxing ever more ardent for Bertrand, as she learned that he was grown a most goodly gallant, tidings reached her that the King of France, in consequence of a tumour which he had had in the breast, and which had been ill tended, was now troubled with a fistula, which occasioned him extreme distress and suffering. Nor had he as yet come by a physician that was able, though many had essayed, to cure him, but had rather grown worse under their hands; wherefore in despair he was minded no more to have recourse to any for counsel or aid. Whereat the damsel was overjoyed, deeming not only that she might find therein lawful occasion to go to Paris, but that if the disease was what she took it to be, it might well betide that she should be wedded to Bertrand. So, for not a little knowledge had she gotten from her father, she prepared a powder from certain herbs serviceable in the treatment of the supposed disease, and straightway took horse and hied her to Paris. Arrived there, she made it her first concern to have sight of Bertrand, and then, having obtained access to the king, she besought him of his grace to show her his disease. The king knew not how to refuse so young, fair, and winsome a damsel, and let her see the place. Whereupon, no longer doubting that she should cure him, she said, "Sire, so please you, I hope in God to cure you of this malady within 8 days, without causing you the least distress or discomfort." The king only scoffed at her words, saying to himself, "How should a damsel have come by a knowledge and skill that the greatest physicians in the world do not possess?" He therefore graciously acknowledged her good intention, and answered that he had resolved no more to follow advice of physician. "Sire," said the damsel, "you disdain my art because I am young and a woman. But I bid you bear in mind that I rely not on my own skill, but on the help of God and the skill of Master Gérard of Narbon, my father, and a famous physician in his day." Whereupon the king said to himself, "Perchance she is sent me by God. Why put I not her skill to the proof, seeing that she says she can cure me in a short time, and cause me no distress?" And being minded to make the experiment, he said, "Damsel, and if, having caused me to cancel my resolve, you should fail to cure me, what are you content should ensue?" "Sire," answered the damsel, "set a guard upon me, and if within 8 days I cure you not, have me burned. But if I cure you, what shall be my guerdon?" "You seem," said the king, "to be yet unmarried. If you shall effect the cure, we will marry you well and in high place." "Sire," returned the damsel, "well content indeed am I that you should marry me, so it be to such a husband as I shall ask of you, save that I may not ask any of your sons, or any other member of the royal house." Whereto the king forthwith consented, and the damsel, thereupon applying her treatment, restored him to health before the period assigned. Wherefore, as soon as the king knew that he was cured, "Damsel," said he, "well have you won your husband." She answered, "In that case, sire, I have won Bertrand de Roussillon, of whom, while yet a child, I was enamoured, and whom I have ever since most ardently loved." To give her Bertrand seemed to the king no small matter, but having pledged his word, he would not break it. So he sent for Bertrand and said to him, "Bertrand, you are now come to man's estate, and fully equipped to enter on it. 'Tis therefore our will that you go back and assume the governance of your county, and that you take with you a damsel whom we have given you to wife." "And who is the damsel, sire?" said Bertrand. "She it is," answered the king, "that has restored us to health by her physic." Now Bertrand, knowing Gilette, and that her lineage was not such as matched his nobility, albeit seeing her he had found her very fair, was overcome with disdain, and answered, "So, sire, you would fain give me a she doctor to wife. Now God forbid that I should ever marry any such woman." "Then," said the king, "you would have us fail of the faith which we pledged to the damsel, who asked you in marriage by way of guerdon for our restoration to health." "Sire," said Bertrand, "you may take from me all that I possess, and give me as your man to whomsoever you may be minded, but rest assured that I shall never be satisfied with such a match." "Nay, but you will," replied the king, "for the damsel is fair and discreet, and loves you well; wherefore we anticipate that you will live far more happily with her than with a dame of much higher lineage." Bertrand was silent, and the king made great preparations for the celebration of the nuptials. The appointed day came, and Bertrand, albeit reluctantly, nevertheless complied, and in the presence of the king was wedded to the damsel, who loved him more dearly than herself. Which done, Bertrand, who had already taken his resolution, said that he was minded to go down to his county, there to consummate the marriage. And so, having craved and had leave of absence of the king, he took horse, but instead of returning to his county, he hied him to Tuscany, where, finding the Florentines at war with the Siennese, he determined to take service with the Florentines, and being made heartily and honourably welcome, was appointed to the command of part of their forces at a liberal stipend, and so remained in their service for a long while. Distressed by this turn of fortune, and hoping by her wise management to bring Bertrand back to his county, the bride hied her to Roussillon, where she was received by all the tenants as their liege lady. She found that during the long absence of the lord everything had fallen into decay and disorder, which, being a capable woman, she rectified with great and sedulous care, to the great joy of the tenants, who held her in great esteem and love, and severely censured the Count that he was not satisfied with her. When the lady had duly ordered all things in the county, she dispatched 2 knights to the Count with the intelligence, praying him that, if 'twas on her account that he came not home, he would so inform her, in which case she would gratify him by departing. To whom with all harshness he replied, "She may even please herself in the matter. For my part, I will go home and live with her when she has this ring on her finger, and a son gotten of me upon her arm." The ring was one which he greatly prized, and never removed from his finger, by reason of a virtue which he had been given to understand that it possessed. The knights appreciated the harshness of a condition which contained 2 articles, both of which were all but impossible, and seeing that by no words of theirs could they alter his resolve, they returned to the lady and delivered his message. Sorely distressed, the lady, after long pondering, determined to try how and where the 2 conditions might be satisfied, that so her husband might be hers again. Having formed her plan, she assembled certain of the more considerable and notable men of the county, to whom she gave a consecutive and most touching narrative of all that she had done for love of the Count, with the result; concluding by saying that she was not minded to tarry there to the Count's perpetual exile, but to pass the rest of her days in pilgrimages and pious works for the good of her soul. Wherefore she prayed them to undertake the defence and governance of the county, and to inform the Count that she had made entire and absolute cession of it to him, and was gone away with the intention of never more returning to Roussillon. As she spoke, tears not a few coursed down the cheeks of the honest men, and again they besought her to change her mind and stay. All in vain, however. She commended them to God, and, accompanied only by one of her male cousins and a chambermaid, all 3 habited as pilgrims, and amply provided with money and precious jewels, she took the road, nor tarried until she was arrived at Florence. There she lodged in a little inn kept by a good woman that was a widow, bearing herself lowly as a poor pilgrim, and eagerly expectant of news of her lord. Now it so befell that the very next day she saw Bertrand pass in front of the inn on horseback, at the head of his company; and though she knew him very well, nevertheless she asked the good woman of the inn who he was. The hostess replied, "'Tis a foreign gentleman, Count Bertrand they call him, a very pleasant gentleman, and courteous, and much beloved in this city. And he is in the last degree enamoured of one of our neighbours here, who is a gentlewoman, but in poor circumstances. A very virtuous damsel she is too, and being as yet unmarried by reason of her poverty, she lives with her mother, who is an excellent and most discreet lady, but for whom, perchance, she would before now have yielded, and gratified the Count's desire." No word of this was lost on the lady. She pondered and meditated every detail with the closest attention, and having laid it all to heart, took her resolution. She ascertained the names and abode of the lady and her daughter that the Count loved, and hied her one day privily, wearing her pilgrim's weeds, to their house, where she found the lady and her daughter in very evident poverty, and, after greeting them, told the lady that, if it were agreeable to her, she would speak with her. The gentlewoman rose and signified her willingness to listen to what she had to say. So they went into a room by themselves and sat down. And then the Countess began thus: "Madam, methinks you are, as I am, under fortune's frown. But perchance you have it in your power, if you are so minded, to afford solace to both of us." The lady answered that, so she might honourably find it, solace indeed was what she craved most of all things in the world. Whereupon the Countess continued, I must first be assured of your faith, wherein if I confide and am deceived, the interests of both of us will suffer." "Have no fear," said the gentlewoman. "Speak your whole mind without reserve, for you will find that there is no deceit in me." So the Countess told who she was, and the whole course of her love affair, from its commencement to that hour, on such wise that the gentlewoman, believing her story the more readily that she had already heard it in part from others, was touched with compassion for her. The narrative of her woes complete, the Countess added, "Now that you have heard my misfortunes, you know the two conditions that I must fulfil, if I would come by my husband. Nor know I any other person than you that may enable me to fulfil them. But so you may, if this which I hear is true, to wit, that my husband is in the last degree enamoured of your daughter." "Madam," replied the gentlewoman, "I know not if the Count loves my daughter, but true it is that he makes great show of loving her. But how may this enable me to do aught for you in the matter that you have at heart?" "The how, madam," returned the Countess, "I will shortly explain to you. But you shall first hear what I intend shall ensue if you serve me. Your daughter, I see, is fair and of marriageable age, and by what I have learned and may well understand, 'tis because you have not the wherewith to marry her that you keep her at home. Now, in recompense of the service that you shall do me, I mean to provide her forthwith from my own moneys with such a dowry as you yourself shall deem adequate for her marriage." The lady was too needy not to be gratified by the proposal, but nevertheless, with the true spirit of the gentlewoman, she answered, "Nay, but, madam, tell me that which I may do for you, and if it shall be such as I may honourably do, gladly will I do it, and then you shall do as you may be minded." Said then the Countess, "I require of you that through some one in whom you trust, you send word to the Count, my husband, that your daughter is ready to yield herself entirely to his will, so she may be sure that he loves her, even as he professes; whereof she will never be convinced until he send her the ring which he wears on his finger, and which, she understands, he prizes so much; which being sent you shall give to me, and shall then send him word that your daughter is ready to do his pleasure. And having brought him hither secretly, you shall contrive that I lie by his side instead of your daughter. Perchance by God's grace I shall conceive, and so, having his ring on my finger, and a son gotten of him on my arm, shall have him for my own again, and live with him even as a wife should live with her husband, and owe it all to you." The lady felt that 'twas not a little that the Countess craved of her, for she feared lest it should bring reproach upon her daughter. But she reflected that to aid the good lady to recover her husband was an honourable enterprise, and that in undertaking it she would be subserving a like end; and so, trusting in the good and virtuous disposition of the Countess, she not only promised to do as she was required, but in no long time, proceeding with caution and secrecy as she had been bidden, she both had the ring from the Count, loath though he was to part with it, and cunningly contrived that the Countess should lie with him in place of her daughter; in which first commingling so ardently sought by the Count, it so pleased God that the lady was gotten, as in due time her delivery made manifest, with 2 sons. Nor once only, but many times did the lady gratify the Countess with the embraces of her husband, using such secrecy that no word thereof ever got wind, the Count all the while supposing that he lay, not with his wife, but with her that he loved, and being wont to give her, as he left her in the morning, some fair and rare jewel, which she jealously guarded. When she perceived that she was with child, The Countess, being minded no more to burden the lady with such service, said to her, "Madam, thanks be to God and to you, I now have that which I desired, and therefore 'tis time that I make you grateful requital, and take my leave of you." The lady answered that she was glad if the Countess had gotten aught that gave her joy, but that 'twas not as hoping to have guerdon thereof that she had done her part, but simply because she deemed it meet and her duty so to do. "Well said, madam," returned the Countess, "and in like manner that which you shall ask of me I shall not give you by way of guerdon, but because I deem it meet and my duty to give it." Whereupon the lady, yielding to necessity and abashed beyond measure, asked of her £100 wherewith to marry her daughter. The Countess, marking her embarrassment and the modesty of her request, gave her £500, besides jewels fair and rare, worth perhaps no less; and having thus much more than contented her, and received her superabundant thanks, she took leave of her, and returned to the inn. The lady, to render purposeless further visits or messages on Bertrand's part, withdrew with her daughter to the house of her kinsfolk in the country. Nor was it long before Bertrand, on the urgent entreaty of his vassals and intelligence of the departure of his wife, quitted Florence and returned home. Greatly elated by this intelligence, the Countess tarried a while in Florence, and was there delivered of 2 sons, as like as possible to their father, whom she nurtured with sedulous care. But by and by she saw fit to take the road, and being come, unrecognised by any, to Montpellier, rested there a few days; and being on the alert for news of the Count and where he was, she learned that on All Saints' Day he was to hold a great reception of ladies and gentlemen at Roussillon, whither, retaining her now wonted pilgrim's weeds, she hied her, and finding that the ladies and gentlemen were all gathered in the Count's palace, and on the point of going to table, she tarried not to change her dress, but went up into the hall, bearing her little ones in her arms, and threading her way through the throng to the place where she saw the Count stand, she threw herself at his feet, and sobbing said to him, "My lord, thy hapless bride am I, who to ensure thy home-coming and abidance in peace have long time been a wanderer, and now demand of thee observance of the condition whereof word was brought me by the 2 knights whom I sent to thee. Lo, in my arms not 1 son only, but 2, gotten of thee, and on my finger thy ring. 'Tis time then that I be received of thee as thy wife, according to thy word." Whereat the Count was all dumbfounded, recognising the ring and his own lineaments in the children, so like were they to him, but saying to himself, nevertheless, "How can it have come about?" So the Countess, while the Count and all that were present marvelled exceedingly, told what had happened, and the manner of it, in precise detail. Wherefore the Count, perceiving that she spoke truth, and having regard to her perseverance and address, and her 2 fine boys, and the wishes of all his vassals and the ladies, who with one accord besought him to own and honour her thenceforth as his lawful bride, laid aside his harsh obduracy, and raised the Countess to her feet, and embraced and kissed her, and acknowledged her for his lawful wife, and the children for his own. Then, having caused her to be rearrayed in garments befitting her rank, he, to the boundless delight of as many as were there, and of all other his vassals, gave up that day, and some that followed, to feasting and merry-making, and did ever thenceforth honour, love, and most tenderly cherish her as his bride and wife. End of Day 3, the 9th story. Recording by Ruth Golding.
Day 3, the 10th story of the Decameron. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For further information or to volunteer, please go to LibriVox.org. Reading by Andy Minter. The Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio. Translated by J. M. Rigg. Day 3, the 10th story. Alibec turns hermit, and is taught by Rustico, a monk, how the devil is put in hell. She is afterwards conveyed thence, and becomes the wife of Narbon.
Dioneo, observing that the queen's story, which he had followed with the closest attention, was now ended, and that it only remained for him to speak, waited not to be bidden, but smilingly thus began.
Gracious ladies, perchance you have not yet heard how the devil is put in hell. Wherefore, without deviating far from the topic of which you have discoursed throughout the day, I will tell you how 'tis done. It may be that the lesson will prove inspiring. Besides which, you may learn therefrom that, albeit love prefers the gay palace and the dainty chamber to the rude cabin, yet for all that he may at times manifest his might in wilds matted with forests, rugged with Alps, and desolate with caverns, whereby it may be understood that all things are subject to his sway. But to come to my story. I say that in the city of Capsa in Barbary there was once a very rich man, who, with other children, had a fair and dainty little daughter, Alibec by name. Now Alibec, not being a Christian, and hearing many Christians that were in the city speak much in praise of the Christian faith and the service of God, did one day inquire of one of them after what fashion it were possible to serve God with as few impediments as might be, and was informed that they served God best who most completely renounced the world and its affairs, like those who had fixed their abode in the wilds of the Thebaid desert. Whereupon, actuated by no sober predilection, but by childish impulse, the girl, who was very simple and about 14 years of age, said never a word more of the matter, but stole away on the morrow, and quite alone set out to walk to the Thebaid desert, and by force of resolution, albeit with no small suffering, she after some days reached those wilds, where, espying a cabin a great way off, she hied her thither, and found a holy man by the door, who, marvelling to see her there, asked her what she came there to seek. She answered that, guided by the Spirit of God, she was come thither seeking if haply she might serve him, and also find some one that might teach her how he ought to be served. Marking her youth and great beauty, the worthy man, fearing lest if he suffered her to remain with him he should be ensnared by the devil, commended her good intention, set before her a frugal repast of roots of herbs, crab apples, and dates, with a little water to wash them down, and said to her, "My daughter, there is a holy man not far from here, who is much better able to teach thee that of which thou art in quest than I am. Go to him, therefore." And he showed her the way. But when she was come whither she was directed, she met with the same answer as before, and so, setting forth again, she came at length to the cell of a young hermit, a worthy man, and very devout, his name Rustico, whom she interrogated as she had the others. Rustico, being minded to make severe trial of his constancy, did not send her away as the others had done, but kept her with him in his cell, and when night came, made her a little bed of palm leaves, whereupon he bade her compose herself to sleep. Hardly had she done so before the solicitations of the flesh joined battle with the powers of Rustico's spirit, and he, finding himself left in the lurch by the latter, endured not many assaults before he beat a retreat, and surrendered at discretion, wherefore he bade adieu to holy meditation and prayer and discipline, and fell a musing on the youth and beauty of his companion, and also how he might so order his conversation with her, that without seeming to her to be a libertine, he might yet compass that which he craved of her. So, probing her by certain questions, he discovered that she was as yet entirely without cognizance of man, and as simple as she seemed. Wherefore he excogitated a plan for bringing her to pleasure him under colour of serving God. He began by giving her a long lecture on the great enmity that subsists between God and the devil, after which he gave her to understand that, God having condemned the devil to hell, to put him there was of all services the most acceptable to God. The girl, asking him how it might be done, Rustico answered, "Thou shalt know it in a trice. Thou hast but to do that which thou seest me do." Then, having divested himself of his scanty clothing, he threw himself stark naked on his knees, as if he would pray, whereby he caused the girl, who followed his example, to confront him in the same posture. The following are untranslated.
E così stando, essendo Rustico più che mai nel suo desidero acceso per lo vederla così bella, venne la resurrezione della carne, la quale, riguardando Alibec e maravigliatasi, disse: Rustico, quella che cos'è che io ti veggio, che così si pigna in fuori, e non lo io? Oh, figliuola mia, disse Rustico, questo è il diavolo di che io t'ho parlato, e vedi tu, ora egli mi dà grandissima molestia, tanto che io appena la posso sofferire. Allora disse la giovane: oh, lodato sia Iddio, che io veggio che io sto meglio che non stai tu, che io non ho cotesto diavolo io. Disse Rustico: tu di vero, ma tu hai un'altra cosa che non la ho io, e haila in iscambio di questo. Disse Alibec: o che? A cui Rustico disse: hai il ninferno, e dicoti che io mi credo che Iddio t'abbia qui mandata per la salute della anima mia, perciò che se questo diavolo pur mi darà questa noia, ove tu vogli aver di me tanta pietà e sofferire che io in inferno il rimetta, tu mi darai grandissima consolazione e a Dio farai grandissimo piacere e servigio, se tu per quello fari in queste parti venuta a sé. Che tu di? La giovane di buona fede rispose: o padre mio, poscia che io l'inferno sia pure quando vi piacerà. Disse allora Rustico: figliola mia, benedetta sia tu. Andiamo dunque e rimettiamolovi sì che egli poscia mi lasci stare. E così detto, menata la giovane sopra uno dei loro letticelli, le insegnò come star si dovesse a dovere incarcerare quel maledetto da Dio. La giovane, che mai più non aveva in inferno messo diavolo alcuno, per la prima volta sentì un poco di noia, perché ella disse a Rustico: per certo, padre mio, mala cosa dee essere questo diavolo, e veramente nemico di Dio, che ancora all'inferno, non che altrui, duole quando egli vi dentro rimesso. Disse Rustico: figliola, egli non avverrà sempre così, e per fare che questo non avvenisse, da 6 volte, anzi che di su il letticel si movessero, ve l'immisero tanto che per quella volta gli trasser sì la superbia del capo, che egli si stette volentieri in pace. Ma ritornatagli poi nel seguente tempo più volte, e la giovane ubbidiente sempre a trargliele si disponesse, avvenne che il giuoco le cominciò a piacere, e cominciò a dire a Rustico: ben veggio che il ver dicevano che valentuomini in capsa, che il servire a Dio era così dolce cosa, e per certo io non mi ricordo che mai alcuna altra ne facessi, che di tanto diletto e piacer mi fosse, quanto è il rimettere il diavolo in inferno. E perciò io giudico ogni altra persona che ad altro che a servire a Dio attende essere una bestia. Per la qual cosa essa spesse volte andava a Rustico e gli dicea: padre mio, io son qui venuta per servire a Dio e non per istare oziosa, andiamo a rimettere il diavolo in inferno. La qual cosa facendo diceva ella alcuna volta: Rustico, io non so perché il diavolo si sfuga dell'inferno, che se egli vi stesse così volentieri come l'inferno il riceve e tiene, egli non se ne uscirebbe mai. Così adunque, invitando spesso la giovane, Rustico era al servigio di Dio, confortandolo, sì la bambaggia del farsetto tratta gli avea, che egli a talora sentiva freddo che un altro sarebbe sudato. E perciò egli incominciò a dire alla giovane che il diavolo non era da castigare né da rimettere in inferno, se non quando egli per superbia levasse il capo. E noi, per grazia di Dio, l'abbiamo sì sgannato, che egli priega il Dio di starsi in pace. E così alquanto impose di silenzio alla giovane, la qual, poi che vide Rustico non la richiedeva a dovere il diavolo rimettere in inferno, gli disse un giorno: Rustico, se il diavolo tuo è gastigato e più non ti dà noia, me il mio inferno non lascia stare, perché tu farai bene che tu col tuo diavolo aiuti a tuttare la rabbia al mio inferno, come io col mio inferno ho aiutato a trarre la superbia del tuo diavolo. Rustico, che di radici d'erba ed acqua viveva, poteva male rispondere alle poste, e dissele che troppi diavoli vorrebbero essere a potere all'inferno attutare, ma che egli ne farebbe ciò che per lui si potesse. E così alcuna volta le soddisfaceva, ma sì era di rado che altro non era che gittare una fava in bocca al leone, di che la giovane, non parendole tanto servire a Dio quanto voleva, mormorava anziché no.
However, the case standing thus, deficiency of power against superfluity of desire, between Rustico's devil and Alibec's hell, it chanced that a fire broke out in Capsa, whereby the house of Alibec's father was burned, and he and all his sons and the rest of his household perished, so that Alibec was left sole heiress of all his estate. And a young gallant, Nerbali by name, who by reckless munificence had wasted all his substance, having discovered that she was alive, addressed himself to the pursuit of her, and having found her in time to prevent the confiscation of her father's estate as an esciat for failure of heirs, took her, much to Rustico's relief and against her own will, back to Capsa, and made her his wife, and shared with her her vast patrimony. But before he had lain with her, she was questioned by the ladies of the manner in which she had served God in the desert, whereto she answered that she had been wont to serve him by putting the devil in hell, and that Nerbali had committed a great sin when he took her out of such service. The ladies, being curious to know how the devil was put in hell, the girls satisfied them, partly by words, partly by signs, whereat they laughed exorbitantly, and still laugh, and said to her, Be not downhearted, daughter, 'tis done here too. Nerbali will know well how to serve God with you in that way. And so, the story passing from mouth to mouth throughout the city, it came at last to be a common proverb, that the most acceptable service that can be rendered to God is to put the devil in hell, which proverb, having travelled hither across the sea, is still current. Wherefore, young ladies, you that have need of the grace of God, see to it that you learn how to put devil in hell, because 'tis mightily pleasing to God, and of great solace to both the parties, and much good may thereby be engendered and ensue. End of Day 3, the 10th story.
Day 3. The conclusion of the Decameron. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio, translated by H.M. Rigg. Day the 3rd. The conclusion. 1,000 times or more had Dioneo's story brought the laugh to the lips of the honorable ladies, so quaint and curiously entertaining found they the fashion of it. And now at its close the Queen, seeing the term of her sovereignty come, took the laurel wreath from her head, and with mien most debonair set it on the brow of Philostrato, saying, "We shall soon see whether the wolf will know better how to guide the sheep than the sheep have yet succeeded in guiding the wolves." Whereat Philostrato said with a laugh, "Had I been hearkened to, the wolves would have taught the sheep to put the devil in hell, even as Rustico taught Alibec. Wherefore call us not wolves, seeing that you have not shown yourselves sheep. However, as best I may be able, I will govern the kingdom committed to my charge." Whereupon Neifile took him up. "Hark ye, Philostrato," she said, "while you thought to teach us, you might have learnt a lesson from us, as did Masetto da Lamporecchio from the nuns, and have recovered your speech when the bones had learned to whistle without a master." Philostrato, perceiving that there was a scythe for each of his arrows, gave up jesting, and addressed himself to the governance of his kingdom. He called the seneschal and held him strictly to account in every particular. He then judiciously ordered all matters as he deemed would be best, and most to the satisfaction of the company, while his sovereignty should last; and having so done, he turned to the ladies and said, "Loving ladies, as my ill luck would have it, since I have had wit to tell good from evil, the charms of one or other of you have kept me ever a slave to love, and for all I shewed myself humble and obedient and conformable, so far as I knew how, to all his ways. My fate has been still the same, to be discarded for another, and go ever from bad to worse, and so I suppose it will be with me to the hour of my death. Wherefore I am minded that to morrow our discourse be of no other topic than that which is most german to my condition, to wit, of those whose loves had a disastrous close, because mine, I expect, will in the long run be most disastrous; nor for other cause was the name by which you address me given me by one that well knew its signification." Which said, he arose and dismissed them all until supper time. So fair and delightsome was the garden that none saw fit to quit it and seek diversion elsewhere; rather, for the sun now shone with a temper radiance that caused no discomfort, some of the ladies gave chase to the kids and conies and other creatures that haunted it, and scampering to and fro among them as they sat, had caused them 100 times or so some slight embarrassment. Dioneo and Fiammetta fell a singing of Messer Guglielmo and the Lady of Vergio. Philomela and Pamphilo sat them down to a game of chess, and as thus they pursued each their several diversions, time sped so swiftly that the supper hour stole upon them almost unawares, whereupon they ranged the tables round the beautiful fountain, and supped with all glad and festal cheer. When the tables were removed, Philostrato, being minded to follow in the footsteps of his fair predecessors in sway, bade Lauretta lead a dance and sing a song. She answered, "My lord, songs of others know I none, nor does my memory furnish me with any of mine own that seems meet for so gay a company; but if you will be content with what I have, gladly will I give you thereof." "Naught of thine," returned the king, "could be other than goodly and delectable. Wherefore give us even what thou hast." So encouraged, Lauretta, with dulcet voice, but manner somewhat languishing, raised the ensuing strain, to which the other ladies responded:
What dame disconsolate may so lament as I, that vainly sigh, to love still dedicate? He that the heaven and every orb doth move form'd me for his delight, fair, debonair, and gracious, apt for love, that here on earth each soaring spirit might have foretaste how above that beauty shows that standeth in his sight. Ah, but dull wit and slight, for that it judgeth ill, liketh me not, nay, doth me vilely rate. There was who loved me, and my maiden grace did fondly clip and strain, as in his arms, so in his soul's embrace. And from mine eyes love's fire did drink amain, and time that glides apace in naught but courting me to spend was fain, whom courteous I did deign even as my peer to entreat, but am of him bereft. Ah, dolorous fate! Came to me next a gallant, swollen with pride, brave in his own conceit, and no less noble eke, whom woe betide that he me took, and holds in all unmeet suspicion jealous-eyed. And I, who wot that me the world should greet as the predestined sweet of many men, well nigh despair to be to one thus subjugate. Ah, woe is me! Cursed be the luckless day when, a new gown to wear, I said the fatal I. For blithe and gay in that plain gown I lived, no whit less fair, while in this rich array a sad and far less honour'd life I bear. Would I had died, or e'er sounded those notes of joy, ah, dolorous cheer, my woe to celebrate! So, list my supplication, lover dear, of whom such joyance I as ne'er another had. Thou that in clear light of the Maker's presence art, deny not pity to thy fear, who thee may ne'er forget, but let one sigh breathe tidings that on high thou burnest still for me, and sue of God that he me there translate.
So ended Lauretta her song, to which all hearkened attentively, though not all interpreted it alike. Some were inclined to give it a moral after the Milanese fashion, to wit, that a good porker was better than pretty quean. Others construed it in a higher, better, and truer sense, which 'tis not to the present purpose to unfold. Some more songs followed by command of the king, who caused torches not a few to be lighted and ranged about the flowery mead, and so the night was prolonged until the last star that had risen had begun to set. Then, bethinking him that 'twas time for slumber, the king bade all good night, and dismissed them to their several chambers. End of Day 3. The conclusion. Day 4. The introduction of the Decameron. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio. Translated by H. M. Rigg. Day the 4th. The Introduction. Endeth here the 3rd day of the Decameron, beginneth the 4th, in which, under the rule of Philostrato, discourse is had of those whose loves had a disastrous close. Dearest ladies, as well from what I heard in converse with the wise, as from matters that not seldom fell within my own observation and reading, I formed the opinion that the vehement and scorching blast of envy was apt to vent itself only upon lofty towers or the highest tree tops. But therein I find that I misjudged, for whereas I ever thought and studied how best to elude the buffetings of that furious hurricane, and to that end kept a course not merely on the plain, but by preference in the depth of the valley, I should be abundantly clear to whose looks at these little stories, written as they are not only in the vulgar Florentine, and in prose, and without dedicatory flourish, but also in as homely and simple a style as may be. Nevertheless, all this has not stood me in such stead, but that I have been shrewdly shaken, nay, all but uprooted by the blast, and altogether lacerated by the bite of this same envy. Whereby I may very well understand that it's true, what the sages aver, that only misery is exempt from envy in the present life. Know then, discreet ladies, that some there are who, reading these little stories, have alleged that I am too fond of you, and that it is not a seemly thing that I should take so much pleasure in ministering to your gratification and solace, and some have found more fault with me for praising you as I do. Others, affecting to deliver a more considered judgment, have said that it ill befits my time of life to ensue such matters, to wit, the discoursing of women, or endeavouring to pleasure them. And not a few, feigning a mighty tender regard to my fame, aver that I should do more wisely to keep ever with the Muses on Parnassus, than to foregather with you in such vain dalliance. Those again there are, who, evincing less wisdom than despite, have told me that I should shew sounder sense, if I bethought me how to get my daily bread, than going after these idle toys, to nourish myself upon the wind; while certain others, in disparagement of my work, strive might and main to make it appear that the matters which I relate fell out otherwise than as I set them forth. Such then, noble ladies, are the blasts, such the sharp and cruel fangs, by which, while I champion your cause, I am assailed, harassed, and well nigh pierced through and through; which censures I hear and mark, God knows, with equal mind; and though to you belongs all my defence, yet I mean not to be niggard of my own powers, but rather, without dealing out to them the castigation they deserve, to give them such slight answer as may secure my ears some respite of their clamour, and that without delay. Seeing that if already, though I have not completed the third part of my work, they are not a few and very presumptuous, I deem it possible that before I have reached the end, should they receive no check, they may have grown so numerous that it would scarce tax their powers to sink me, and that your forces, great though they be, would not suffice to withstand them. However, I am minded to answer none of them until I have related in my behoof, not indeed an entire story, for I would not seem to foist my stories in among those of so honourable a company as that with which I have made you acquainted, but a part of one that is very incompleteness may show that it is not one of them. Wherefore, addressing my assailants, I say, that in our city there was in old time a citizen named Filippo Balducci, a man of quite low origin, but of good substance and well versed and expert in matters belonging to his condition, who had a wife that he most dearly loved, as did she him, so that their life passed in peace and concord, nor there was aught they studied so much as how to please each other perfectly. Now it came to pass, as it does to every one, that the good lady departed this life, leaving Filippo none of hers, but an only son, that she had had by him, and who was then about 2 years old. His wife's death left Filippo as disconsolate as ever was any man for the loss of a loved one, and sorely missing the companionship that was most dear to him, he resolved to have done with the world, and devote himself and his little son to the service of God. Wherefore, having dedicated all his goods to charitable uses, he forthwith betook him to the summit of Monte Assinaio, where he installed himself with his son in a little cell, and living on alms passed his days in fasting and prayer, being careful above all things to say nothing to the boy of any temporal matters, nor to let him see aught of the kind, lest they should distract his mind from his religious exercises, but discoursing with him continually of the glory of the life eternal, and of God and the saints, and teaching him naught else but holy orisons, in which way of life he kept him not a few years, never suffering him to quit the cell or see aught but himself. From time to time the worthy man would go to Florence, where divers of the faithful would afford him relief according to his needs, and so he would return to his cell. And thus it fell out that one day Filippo, now an aged man, being asked by the boy, who was about 18 years old, whither he went, told him. Whereupon, "Father," said the boy, "you are now old, and scarce able to support fatigue. Why take you me not with you for once to Florence, and give me to know devout friends of God, and you, so that I, who am young and fitter for such exertion than you, may thereafter go to Florence for our supplies at your pleasure, and you remain here?" The worthy man, bethinking him that his son was now grown up, and so habituated to the service of God as hardly to be seduced by the things of the world, said to himself, "He says tell." And so, as he must needs go to Florence, he took the boy with him; where, seeing the palaces, the houses, the churches, and all matters else with which the city abounds, and of which he had no more recollection than if he had never seen them, the boy found all passing strange, and questioned his father of not a few of them, what they were and how they were named; his curiosity being no sooner satisfied in one particular than he plied his father with a further question; and so it befell that, while son and father were thus occupied in asking and answering questions, they encountered a bevy of damsels, fair and richly arrayed, being on their return from a wedding, whom the young man no sooner saw than he asked his father what they might be. "My son," answered the father, "fix thy gaze on the ground, regard them not at all, for naughty things are they." "Oh," said the son, "and what is their name?" The father, fearing to awaken some mischievous craving of concupiscence in the young man, would not denote them truly, to wit as women, but said, "They are called goslings." Whereupon, wonderful to tell, the lad, who had never before set eyes on any woman, thought no more of the palaces, the oxen, the horses, the asses, the money, or aught else that he had seen, but exclaimed, "Prithee, father, let me have one of those goslings." "Alas, my son," replied the father, "speak not of them, they are naughty things." "Oh," questioned the son, "but are naughty things made like that?" "Ay," returned the father; whereupon the son, "I know not," he said, "what you say, nor why they should be naughty things; for my part I have as yet seen naught that seemed to me so fair and delectable. They are fairer than the painted angels that you have so often shown me. Oh, if you love me, do but let us take one of these goslings up there, and I will see that she have whereon to bill." "Nay," said the father, "that will not I. Thou knowest not whereon they bill." And straightway, being ware that nature was more potent than his art, he repented him that he had brought the boy to Florence. But enough of this story; 'tis time for me to cut it short, and return for those for whose instruction it is told. They say then, some of these my censors, that I am too fond of you, young ladies, and am at too great pains to pleasure you. Now that I am fond of you, and am at pains to pleasure you, I do most frankly and fully confess; and I ask them whether, considering only all that it means to have had, and to have continually, before one's eyes your debonair demeanour, your bewitching beauty and exquisite grace, and therewithal your modest womanliness, not to speak of having known the amorous kisses, the caressing embraces, the voluptuous comminglings, whereof our intercourse with you, ladies most sweet, not seldom is productive, they do verily marvel that I am fond of you, seeing that one who was nurtured, reared, and brought up on a savage and solitary mountain, within the narrow circuit of a cell, without other companion than his father, had no sooner seen you than it was you alone that he desired, that he demanded, that he sought with ardour. Will they tear, will they lacerate me with their censures, if I, whose body Heaven fashioned all apt for love, whose soul from very boyhood was dedicated to you, am not insensible to the power of the light of your eyes, to the sweetness of your honeyed words, to the flame that is kindled by your gentle sighs, but am fond of you, and sedulous to pleasure you? You, again I bid them remember, in whom I hermit, a rude witless lad, liker to an animal than a human being, found more to delight him than in aught else that he saw. Of a truth who taxes me thus, must be one that, feeling, knowing naught of the pleasure and power of natural affection, loves you not, nor craves your love, and such an one I hold in light esteem. And as for those that go about to find ground of exception in my age, they do but show that they ill understand that the leek, albeit its head in white, has a green tail. But jesting apart, thus I answer them, that never to the end of my life shall I deem it shameful to me to pleasure those to whom Guido Cavalcanti and Dante Alighieri in their old age, and Messer Signo da Pistoia in extreme old age, accounted it an honour and found it a delight to minister gratification. And but that it were a deviation from the use and wont of discourse, I would call history to my aid, and show it to abound with stories of noble men of old time, who in their ripest age studied above all things else to pleasure the ladies, whereof if they be ignorant, go they and get them to school. To keep with the Muses on Parnassus is counsel I approve, but tarry with them always we cannot, nor they with us, nor is a man blameworthy, if, when he happen to part from them, he find his delight in those that resemble them. The Muses are ladies, and albeit ladies are not the peers of the Muses, yet they have their outward semblance, for which cause, if not for other, it's reasonable that I should be fond of them. Besides which, ladies have been to me the occasion of composing some 1,000 verses, but of never a verse that I made were the Muses the occasion. Howbeit it was with their aid, it was under their influence that I composed those 1,000 verses, and perchance they have sometimes visited me to encourage me in my present task, humble indeed though it be, doing honour and paying, as it were, tribute to the likeness which the ladies have to them. Wherefore, while I weave these stories, I stray not so far from Mount Parnassus and the Muses, as not a few perchance suppose. But what shall we say to those, in whom my hunger excites such commiseration that they bid me get me bread? Verily I know not, save this. Suppose that in my need I were to beg bread of them, what would be their answer? I doubt not they would say, Go seek it among the fables. And in sooth the poets have found more bread among their fables than many rich men among their treasures. And many that have gone after fables have crowned their days with splendour, while, on the other hand, not a few, in the endeavour to get them more bread than they needed, have perished miserably. But why waste more words on them? Let them send me packing, when I ask bread of them, not that, thank God, I have yet need of it, and should I ever come to be in need of it, I know, like the Apostle, how to abound and to be in want, and so I am minded to be beholden to none but myself. As for those who say that these matters fell out otherwise than as I relate them, I should account it no small favour if they would produce the originals, and should what I write not accord with them, I would acknowledge the justice of their censure, and study to amend my ways. But, until better evidence is forthcoming than their words, I shall adhere to my own opinion, without seeking to deprive them of theirs, and give them tit for tat. And being minded that for this while this answer suffice, I say that with God and you, in whom I trust, most gentle ladies, to aid and protect me, and patience for my stay, I shall go forward with my work, turning my back on this tempest, however it may rage. For I see not that I can fare worse than the fine dust, which the blast of the whirlwind either leaves where it lies, or bears aloft, not seldom over the heads of men, over the crowns of kings, of emperors, and sometimes suffers to settle on the roofs of lofty palaces, and the summits of the tallest towers, whence if it fall, it cannot sink lower than the level from which it was raised. And if I ever devoted myself and all my powers to minister in any wise to your gratification, I am now minded more than ever so to do, because I know that there is naught that any can justly say in regard thereof, but that I, and others who love you, follow the promptings of nature, whose laws whoso would withstand has need of powers preeminent, and even so will ofttimes labour not merely in vain, but to his own most grievous disadvantage. Such powers I own that I neither have nor to such end desire to have, and had I them, I would rather leave them to another than use them myself. Wherefore let my detractors hold their peace, and if they cannot get heat, why, let them shiver their life away, and, while they remain addicted to their delights, or rather corrupt tastes, let them leave me to follow my own bent during the brief life that is accorded us. But this had been a long digression, fair ladies, and it is time to retrace our steps to the point where we deviated, and continue in the course on which we started. The sun had chased every star from the sky, and lifted the dank murk of night from the earth, when, Philostrato being risen, and having roused all his company, they hied them to the fair garden, and there fell to disporting themselves. The time for breakfast being come, they took it where they had supped on the preceding evening, and after they had slept they rose, when the sun was in his zenith, and seated themselves in their wonted manner by the beautiful fountain, where Fiammetta, being bidden by Philostrato to lead off the story-telling, awaited no second command, but debonairly thus began. End of Introduction of Day 4th.
First story of the Decameron. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Gesine. The Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio. Translated by J. M. Rigg. Day 4. The first story. Tancred, Prince of Salerno, slays his daughter's lover, and sends her his heart in a golden cup. She pours upon it a poisonous distillation, which she drinks and dies. A direful theme has our king allotted us for to-day's discourse, seeing that, whereas we are here met for our common delectation, needs must we now tell of others' tears, whereby, whether telling or hearing, we cannot but be moved to pity. Perchance 'twas to temper, in some degree, the gaiety of the past days, that he so ordained, but, whatever may have been his intent, his will must be to me immutable law. Wherefore I will narrate to you a matter that befell piteously, nay, woefully, and so as you may well weep thereat. Tancred, Prince of Salerno, a lord most humane and kind of heart, but that in his old age he embrued his hands in the blood of a lover, had in the whole course of his life but one daughter, and had he not had her, he had been more fortunate. Never was a daughter more tenderly beloved of a father than she of the prince, who for that cause, not knowing how to part with her, kept her unmarried for many a year after she had come of marriageable age, but then at last he gave her to a son of the Duke of Capua, with whom she had lived but a short while when he died, and she returned to her father. Most lovely was she of form and feature, never woman more so, and young and light of heart, and more knowing, perchance, than beseemed a woman. Dwelling thus with her loving father, as a great lady in no small luxury, nor feeling to see that the prince, for the great love he bore her, was at no pains to provide her with another husband, and deeming it unseemly on her part to ask one of him, she cast about how she might come by a gallant to be her secret lover. And seeing at her father's court not a few men, both gentle and simple, that resorted thither, as we know men used to frequent courts, and closely scanning their mien and manners, she preferred before all others the prince's page, Guiscardo by name, a man of very humble origin, but preeminent for native worth and noble bearing, of whom, seeing him frequently, she became hotly enamoured, hourly extolling his qualities more and more highly. The young man, who for all his youth by no means lacked shrewdness, read her heart, and gave her his own on such wise that his love for her engrossed his mind to the exclusion of almost everything else. While thus they burned in secret for one another, the lady, desiring of all things a meeting with Guiscardo, but being shy of making any her confidant, hit upon a novel expedient to concert the affair with him. She wrote him a letter containing her commands for the ensuing day, and thrust it into a cane in the space between two of the knots, which cane she gave to Guiscardo, saying, "Thou canst let thy servant have it for a bellows to blow thy fire up to-night." Guiscardo took it, and feeling sure that 'twas not unadvisedly that she made him such a present, accompanied with such words, hied him straight home, where, carefully examining the cane, he observed that it was cleft, and opening it, found the letter; which he had no sooner read and learned what he was to do, than, pleased as ne'er another, he fell to devising how to set all in order that he might not fail to meet the lady on the following day, after the manner she had prescribed. Now hard by the prince's palace was a grotto, hewn in days of old in the solid rock, and now long disused, so that an artificial orifice by which it received a little light was all but choked with brambles and plants that grew about and overspread it. From one of the ground-floor rooms of the palace, which room was part of the lady's suite, a secret stair led to the grotto, though the entrance was barred by a very strong door. This stair, having been from time immemorial disused, had passed out of mind so completely that there was scarce any that remembered it was there, but love, whose eyes nothing, however secret, may escape, had brought it to the mind of the enamoured lady. For many a day, using all secrecy, that none should discover her, she had wrought with her tools until she had succeeded in opening the door, which done, she had gone down into the grotto alone, and having observed the orifice, had by her letter apprised Guiscardo of its apparent height above the floor of the grotto, and bidden him contrive some means of descending thereby. Eager to carry the affair through, Guiscardo lost no time in digging up a ladder of ropes, whereby he might ascend and descend; and having put on a suit of leather to protect him from the brambles, he hied him the following night, keeping the affair close from all, to the orifice, made the ladder fast by one of its ends to a massive trunk that was rooted in the mouth of the orifice, climbed down the ladder, and awaited the lady. On the morrow, making as if she would fain sleep, the lady dismissed her damsels, and locked herself into her room. She then opened the door of the grotto, hied her down, and met Guiscardo, to their marvellous mutual satisfaction. The lovers then repaired to her room, where in exceeding great joyance they spent no small part of the day. Nor were they neglectful of the precautions needful to prevent discovery of their amour, but in due time Guiscardo returned to the grotto, whereupon the lady locked the door and rejoined her damsels. At nightfall Guiscardo reascended his ladder, and issuing forth of the orifice, hied him home; nor, knowing now the way, did he fail to revisit the grotto many a time thereafter. But fortune, noting with envious eyes a happiness of such degree and duration, gave to events a dolorous turn, whereby the joy of the two lovers was converted into bitter lamentation. 'Twas Tancred's custom to come from time to time quite alone to his daughter's room, and tarry talking with her a while; whereby it so befell that he came down there one day after breakfast, while Gismonda, such was the lady's name, was in her garden with her damsels, so that none saw or heard him enter, nor would he call his daughter, for he was minded that she should not forego her pleasure. But finding the windows closed and the bed curtains drawn down, he seated himself on a divan that stood at one end of the corners of the bed, rested his head on the bed, drew the curtain over him, and thus, hidden as if of set purpose, fell asleep. As he slept, Gismonda, who, as it happened, had caused Guiscardo to come that day, left her damsels in the garden, softly entered the room, and having locked herself in, unwitting that there was another in the room, opened the door to Guiscardo, who was waiting. Straightway they got them to bed, as was their wont, and while they there solaced and disported them together, so it befell that Tancred awoke, and heard and saw what they did, whereat he was troubled beyond measure, and at first was minded to upbraid them, but on second thoughts he deemed it best to hold his peace, and avoid discovery, if so he might with greater stealth and less dishonour carry out the design which was already in his mind. The two lovers continued long together, as they were wont, all unwitting of Tancred, but at length they saw fit to go out of bed, when Guiscardo went back to the grotto, and the lady hied her forth of the room. Whereupon Tancred, old though he was, got out at one of the windows, clambered down into the garden, and, seen by none, returned sorely troubled to his room. By his command, two men took Guiscardo early that same night, as he issued forth of the orifice accoutred in his suit of leather, and brought him privily to Tancred, who, as he saw him, all but wept, and said, "Guiscardo, my kindness to thee is ill requited by the outrage and dishonour which thou hast done me in the person of my daughter, as today I have seen with my own eyes." To which Guiscardo could answer naught but, "Love is more potent than either you or I." Tancred then gave order to keep him privily under watch and ward in a room within the palace, and so it was done. Next day, while Gismonda wotted naught of these matters, Tancred, after pondering divers novel expedients, hied him after breakfast, according to his wont, to his daughter's room, where, having called her to him and locked himself in with her, he began, not without tears, to speak on this wise: "Gismonda, conceiving that I knew thy virtue and honour, never, though it had been reported to me, would I have credited, had I not seen with my own eyes, that thou wouldst so much as in idea, not to say fact, have ever yielded thyself to any man but thy husband. Wherefore, for the brief residue of life that my age has in store for me, the memory of thy fall will ever be grievous to me. And would to God, as thou must needs demean thyself to such dishonour, thou hadst taken a man that matched thy nobility, but of all the men that frequent my court thou must needs choose Guiscardo, a young man of the lowest condition, a fellow whom we brought up in charity from his tender years, for whose sake thou hast plunged me into the abyss of mental tribulation, insomuch that I know not what course to take in regard of thee. As to Guiscardo, whom I caused to be arrested last night as he issued from the orifice, and kept in durance, my course is already taken. But how am I to deal with thee, God knows I know not. I am distraught between the love which I have ever borne thee, love such as no father ever bare to daughter, and the most just indignation evoked in me by thy signal folly. My love prompts me to pardon thee, my indignation bids me harden my heart against thee, though I do violence to my nature. But before I decide upon my course, I would fain hear what thou hast to say to this." So saying, he bent his head, and wept as bitterly as any child that had been soundly thrashed. Her father's words, and the tidings they conveyed, that not only was her secret passion discovered, but Guiscardo taken, caused Gismonda immeasurable grief, which she was again and again on the point of evincing, as most women do, by cries and tears, but her high spirit triumphed over this weakness. By a prodigious effort she composed her countenance, and taking it for granted that her Guiscardo was no more, she inly devoted herself to death rather than a single prayer for herself should escape her lips. Wherefore, not as a woman stricken with grief or chidden for a fault, but unconcerned and unabashed, with tearless eyes, and frank and utterly dauntless mien, thus answered she her father: "Tancred, your accusation I shall not deny, neither will I cry you mercy, for naught should I gain by denial, nor aught would I gain by supplication. Nay more, there is naught I will do to conciliate thy humanity and love. My only care is to confess the truth, to defend my honour by words of sound reason, and then by deeds most resolute to give effect to the promptings of my high soul. True it is that I have loved and loved Guiscardo, and during the brief while I have yet to live shall love him. Nor after death, so there be then love, shall I cease to love him. But that I love him is not imputable to my womanly frailty so much as to the little zeal thou showedst me for my bestowal in marriage, and to Guiscardo's own worth. It should not have escaped thee, Tancred, creature of flesh and blood as thou art, that thy daughter was also a creature of flesh and blood, and not of stone or iron. It was, and is, thy duty to bear in mind, old though thou art, the nature and the might of the laws to which youth is subject, and though thou hast spent part of thy best years in martial exercises, thou shouldst nevertheless have not been ignorant how potent is the influence even upon the aged, to say nothing of the young, of ease and luxury. And not only am I, as being your daughter, a creature of flesh and blood, but my life is not so far spent, but I am still young, and thus doubly fraught with fleshly appetite, the vehemence whereof is marvellously enhanced by reason that, having been married, I have known the pleasure that ensues upon the satisfaction of such desire. Which forces being powerless to withstand, I did but act as was natural in a young woman, when I gave way to them, and yielded myself to love. Nor in sooth did I fail to the utmost of my power so to order the indulgence of my natural propensity that my sin should bring shame neither upon thee nor upon me. To which end love in his pity and fortune in a friendly mood found and discovered me a secret way whereby non-witting I attained my desire. This from whomsoever thou hast learned it, howsoever thou comest to know it, I deny not. 'Twas not at random, as many women do, that I loved Guiscardo, but by deliberate choice I preferred him before all other men, and of determinate forethought I lured him to my love, whereof through his and my discretion and constancy I have long had joyance. Wherein 'twould seem that thou, following rather the opinion of the vulgar than the dictates of truth, find cause to chide me more severely than in my sinful love. For as if thou wouldst not have been vexed, had my choice fallen on a nobleman, thou complainest that I have foregathered with a man of low condition, and dost not see that therein thou censurest not my fault but that of fortune, which not seldom raises the unworthy of high place and leaves the worthiest in low estate. But leave we this. Consider a little the principle of things. Thou seest that in regard of our flesh we are all moulded of the same substance, and that all souls are endowed by one and the same Creator with equal faculties, equal powers, equal virtues. 'Twas merit that made the first distinction between us, born as we were, nay, as we are, all equal. And those whose merits were and were approved in act the greatest were called noble, and the rest were not so denoted. Which law, albeit overlaid by the contrary usage of after times, is not yet abrogated, nor so impaired that it is still traceable in nature and good manners. For which cause whoso with merit acts does plainly show himself a gentleman, and if any denote him otherwise, the default is his own, and not his whom he so denotes. Pass in review all thy nobles, weigh their merits, their manners and bearing, and then compare Guiscardo's qualities with theirs. If thou wilt judge without prejudice, thou wilt pronounce him noble in the highest degree, and thy nobles one and all churls. As to Guiscardo's merits and worth, I did but trust the verdict which thou thyself didst utter in words, and which mine own eyes confirmed. Of whom had he such commendation as of thee for all those excellences whereby a good man and true merits commendation? And in sooth thou didst him but justice, for unless mine eyes have played me false, there was naught for which thou didst commend him but I had seen him practise it, and that more admirably than words of thine might express. And had I been at all deceived in this matter, 'twould have been by thee. Wilt thou say then that I have foregathered with a man of low condition? If so, thou wilt not say true. Didst thou say with a poor man, the impeachment might be allowed to thy shame, that thou so ill hast known how to requite a good man and true that is thy servant. But poverty, though it take away all else, deprives no man of gentilesse. Many kings, many great princes were once poor, and many a ditcher or herdsman has been and is very wealthy. As for thy last perpended doubt, to wit, how thou shouldst deal with me, banish it utterly from thy thoughts. If in the extreme old age thou art minded to manifest a harshness unwonted in thy youth, wreak thy harshness on me, resolved as I am to cry thee no mercy, prime cause as I am that this sin, if sin it be, has been committed. For of this I warrant thee, that as thou mayst have done or shalt do to Guiscardo, if to me thou do not the like, I with my own hands will do it. Now get thee gone to shed thy tears with the women, and when thy melting mood is over, ruthlessly destroy Guiscardo and me, if such thou deem our merited doom, by one and the same blow. The loftiness of his daughter's spirit was not unknown to the prince, but still he did not credit her with a resolve quite as firmly fixed as her words implied, to carry their purport into effect. So, parting from her without the least intention of using harshness towards her in her own person, he determined to quench the heat of her love by wreaking his vengeance on her lover, and bade the two men that had charge of Guiscardo to strangle him noiselessly that same night, take the heart out of the body, and send it to him. The men did his bidding, and on the morrow the prince had a large and beautiful cup of gold brought to him, and having put Guiscardo's heart therein, sent it by the hand of one of his most trusted servants to his daughter, charging the servant to say, as he gave it to her, "Thy father sends you this, to give thee joy of that which thou lovest best, even as thou hast given him joy of that which he loved best." Now when her father had left her, Gismonda, wavering not a joint in her stern resolve, had sent for poisonous herbs and roots, and therefrom had distilled a water to have it ready for use, if that which she apprehended should come to pass. And when the servant appeared with the prince's present and message, she took the cup unblenchingly, and having lifted the lid, and seen the heart, and apprehended the meaning of the words, and that the heart was beyond a doubt Guiscardo's, she raised her head, and looking straight at the servant, said, "Sepulture less honourable than of gold had ill befitted heart such as this. Herein has my father done wisely." Which said, she raised it to her lips and kissed it, saying, "In all things and at all times, even to the last hour of my life, have I found my father most tender in his love, but now more so than ever before. Wherefore I now render him the last thanks which will ever be due from me to him for his goodly present." So she spoke, and straining the cup to her, bowed her head over it, and gazing at the heart, said, "O sojourn most sweetly of all my joys, accursed be he by whose ruthless act I see thee with the bodily eye. 'Twas enough that to my mind's eye thou wert hourly present. Thou hast run thy course, thou hast closed the span that fortune allotted thee, thou hast reached the goal of all. Thou hast left behind thee the woes and weariness of the world, and thy enemy has himself granted thee sepulture, and accordant with thy deserts. Now circumstance was wanting to duly celebrate thy obsequies, save the tears of her whom, while thou liv'dst, thou didst so dearly love; which that thou shouldst not lack, my remorseless father was prompted of God to send thee to me, and albeit my resolve was fixed to die with eyes unmoistened, and front all unperturbed by fear, yet will I accord thee my tears, which done, my care shall be forthwith by thy means to join my soul to that most precious soul which thou didst once enshrine. And is there other company than hers, in which more of joy and peace I might fare to the abodes unknown? She is yet here within, I doubt not, contemplating the abodes of her and my delights, and, for sure I am that she loves me, awaiting my soul that loves her before all else. Having thus spoken, she bowed herself low over the cup, and, while no womanish cry escaped her, 'twas as if a fountain of water were unloosed within her head, so wondrous a flood of tears gushed from her eyes, while times without number she kissed the dead heart. Her damsels that stood around her knew not whose the heart might be, or what her words might mean, but melting in sympathy they all wept, and compassionately, as vainly, inquired the cause of her lamentation, and in many other ways sought to comfort her to the best of their understanding and power. When she had wept her fill, she raised her head and dried her eyes. Then, "O heart," said she, "much cherished heart, discharged is my every duty towards thee. Naught now remains for me to do but to come and unite my soul with thine." So saying, she sent for the vase that held the water which the day before she had distilled, and emptied it into the cup where lay the heart bathed in her tears. Then, nowise afraid, she set her mouth to the cup and drained it dry, and so with the cup in her hand she got her upon her bed, and having there disposed her person in guise as seemly as she might, laid her dead lover's heart upon her own, and silently awaited death. Meanwhile the damsels, seeing and hearing what passed, but knowing not what the water was that she had drunk, had sent word of each particular to Tancred, who, apprehensive of that which came to pass, came down with all haste to his daughter's room, where he arrived just as she got her upon her bed, and, now too late, addressed himself to comfort her with soft words, and seeing in what plight she was, burst into a flood of bitter tears. To whom the lady, "Reserve thy tears, Tancred, till fortune send thee hap less longed for this. Waste them not on me, who care not for them. Who ever yet saw any but thee bewail the consummation of his desire? But if of the love thou once didst bear me any spark still lives in thee, be it thy parting grace to me, that as thou brookedst not that I should live with Guiscardo in privity and seclusion, so wherever thou mayst have caused Guiscardo's body to be cast, mine may be united with it in the common view of all." The prince replied not, for excess of grief, and the lady, feeling that her end was come, strained the dead heart to her bosom, saying, "Fare ye well, I take my leave of you." And with eyelids drooped and every sense evanished, departed this life of woe. Such was the lamentable end of the loves of Guiscardo and Gismonda, whom Tancred, tardily repentant of his harshness, mourned not a little, as did also all the folk of Salerno, and had honourably interred side by side in the same tomb. End of Day 4, the first story.
4. The second story of the Decameron. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Miette. The Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio. Translated by J.M. Rigg. Day 4. The second story. Friar Alberto gives a lady to understand that she is beloved of the angel Gabriel, in whose shape he lies with her sundry times. Afterward, for fear of her kinsman, he flings himself forth of her house, and finds shelter in the house of a poor man, who on the morrow leads him in the guise of a wild man into the piazza, where, being recognized, he is apprehended by his brethren and imprisoned.
More than once had Fiammetta's story brought tears to the eyes of her fair companions, but now that it was ended, the king said with an austere air, I should esteem my life but a paltry price to pay for half the delight that Gismonda had with Guiscardo, whereat no lady of you all should marvel, seeing that each hour that I live I die 1,000 deaths. Nor is there so much as a particle of compensating joy allotted me. But a truce to my own concerns, I ordain that Pompinia do next ensue our direful argument, wherewith the tenor of my life in part accords; and if she follows in Fiametta's footsteps, I doubt not I shall presently feel some drops of dew distil upon my fire. Pompinia received the king's command in a spirit more accordant with what, from her own bent, she divined to be the wishes of her fair gossips, than with the king's words; wherefore, being minded rather to afford them some diversion, than, save as in duty bound, to satisfy the king, she made choice of a story which, without deviating from the prescribed theme, should move a laugh, and thus began.
'Tis a proverb current among the vulgar, that whoso being wicked is righteous reputed, may sin as he will, and 'twill never be imputed. Which proverb furnishes me with abundant matter of discourse, germane to our theme, besides occasion to exhibit the quality and degree of the hypocrisy of the religious, who flaunt it in ample flowing robes, and, with faces made pallid by art, with voices low and gentle to beg alms, most loud and haughty to reprove in others their own sins, would make believe that their way of salvation lies in taking from us, and ours in giving to them. Nay, more, as if they had not, like us, paradise to win, but were already its lords and masters, assign therein to each that dies a place more or less exalted according to the amount of money that he has bequeathed to them, which, if they believe, 'tis by dint of self-delusion, and to the effect of deluding all that put faith in their words, of whose guile were it lawful for me to make as full exposure as were fitting, not a few simple folk should soon be enlightened as to what they cloak within the folds of their voluminous habits. But would to God all might have the like reward of their lives as a certain friar minor, no novice, but one that was reputed among the greatest at Venice, whose story, rather than aught else, I am minded to tell you, if so I may, perchance, by laughter and jollity, relieve in some degree your souls that are heavy laden with pity for the death of Gismonda. Know then, noble ladies, that there was in Imola a man of evil and corrupt life, Berto della Mazza by name, whose pestilent practices came at length to be so well known to the good folk of Imola that 'twas all one whether he lied or spoke the truth, for there was not a soul in Imola that believed a word he said. Wherefore, seeing that his tricks would pass no longer there, he removed, as in despair, to Venice, that common sink of all abominations, thinking there to find other means than he had found elsewhere to the prosecution of his nefarious designs. And, as if conscience-stricken for his past misdeeds, he assumed an air of the deepest humility, turned the best Catholic of them all, and went and made himself a friar minor, taking the name of Friar Alberto di Imola. With his habit he put on a show of austerity, highly commending penitence and abstinence, and eating or drinking no sort of meat or wine, but such as was to his taste. And scarce a soul was there that wist that the thief, the pimp, the cheat, the assassin, had not been suddenly converted into a great preacher without continuing in the practice of the said iniquities, whensoever the same was privily possible. And withal, having got himself made priest, as often as he celebrated at the altar, he would weep over the passion of our Lord, so there were folk in plenty to see, for tears cost him little enough, when he had a mind to shed them. In short, what with his sermons and his tears, he duped the folk of Venice to such a tune that scarce a will was there made but he was its executor and depository. Nay, not a few made him trustee of their moneys, and most, or well nigh most, men and women alike, their confessor and counsellor. In short, he had put off the wolf and put on the shepherd, and the fame of his holiness was such in those parts that St. Francis himself had never the like at Assisi. Now, it so befell that among the ladies that came to confess to this holy friar was one Mona Lisetta of Calquirino, the young, silly, empty-headed wife of a great merchant, who was gone with the galleys to Flanders. Like a Venetian, for unstable are they all, though she placed herself at his feet, she told him but a part of her sins, and when Friar Alberto asked her whether she had a lover, she replied with black looks, "How now, Master Friar? Have you not eyes in your head? See you no difference between my charms and those of other women? Lovers in plenty might I have, so I would, but charms such as mine must not be cheapened. 'Tis not every man that might presume to love me. How many ladies have you seen whose beauty is comparable to mine? I should adorn paradise itself." Whereto she added so much more in praise of her beauty that the friar could scarce hear with patience. Howbeit, discerning at a glance that she was none too well furnished with sense, he deemed the soil meet for his plough, and fell forthwith inordinately in love with her, though he deferred his blandishments to a more convenient season, and by way of supporting his character for holiness began instead to chide her, telling her, among other novelties, that this was vainglory. Whereto the lady retorted that he was a blockhead, and could not distinguish one degree of beauty from another. Wherefore Friar Alberto, lest he should occasion her too much chagrin, cut short the confession and suffered her to depart with the other ladies. Some days later, accompanied by a single trusty friend, he hied him to Mona Lisetta's house, and having withdrawn with her alone into a saloon, where they were safe from observation, he fell on his knees at her feet, and said, "Madam, for the love of God, I crave your pardon of that which I said to you on Sunday, when you spoke to me of your beauty, for so grievously was I chastised therefore that very night, that 'tis but to-day that I have been able to quit my bed." "And by whom," quoth my lady, Battledore, "were you so chastised?" "I will tell you," returned Fra Alberto. "That night I was, as is ever my wont, at my orisons, when suddenly a great light shone in my cell, and before I could turn me to see what it was, I saw standing over me a right goodly youth with a stout cudgel in his hand, who seized me by the habit and threw me at his feet and belaboured me till I was bruised from head to foot. And when I asked him why he used me thus, he answered, 'tis because thou didst to-day presume to speak slightingly of the celestial charms of Monna Lisetta, whom I love next to God himself. Whereupon I asked, And who are you? And he made answer that he was the angel Gabriel. Then said I, O my lord, I pray your pardon me. Wheretofore he answered, I pardon thee on condition that thou go to her, with what speed thou mayest, and obtain her pardon. Which if she accord thee not, I shall come back hither and give thee belabouring's enough with my cudgel to make thee a sad man for the rest of thy days. What more, he said, I dare not tell you until you first pardon me. Whereat our flimsy, pumpkin-pated Lady Lackbrain was overjoyed, taking all the friar's words for gospel. So after a while she said, And did I not tell you, Friar Alberto, that my charms were celestial? But so help me God, I am moved to pity of you. And forthwith I pardon you, lest worse should befall you. So only you can tell me what more the angel said. So will I gladly, madam, returned Friar Alberto, now that I have your pardon. This only I bid you bear in mind, that you have a care that never a soul in the world hear from you a single word of what I shall say to you. If you would not spoil your good fortune, wherein there is not to-day in the whole world a lady that may compare with you, know then that the angel Gabriel bade me to tell you stands so high in his favour that again and again he would have come to pass the night with you, but that he doubted he should affright you. So now he sends you word through me that he would fain come one night and stay a while with you. And seeing that, being an angel, if he should come visit you in his angelic shape, he might not be touched by you. He would, to pleasure you, present himself in human shape, and so he bids you send him word when you would have him come, and in whose shape, and he will come. For which cause you may deem yourself more blessed than any other lady that lives. My Lady Vanity then said that she was highly flattered to be beloved of the angel Gabriel, whom she herself loved so well that she had never grudged for solely to burn a candle before his picture, whenever she saw it, and that he was welcome to visit her as often as he liked, and would always find her alone in her room, on the understanding, however, that he should not desert her for the Virgin Mary, whom she had heard he did mightily affect, and indeed 'twould so appear, for wherever she saw him, he was always on his knees at her feet. For the rest, he might even come in what shape he pleased, so that it was not such as to terrify her. Then said Fra Alberto, Madam, 'tis wisely spoken, and I will arrange it all with him just as you say. But 'tis in your power to do me a great favour, which will cost you nothing, and this favour is that you will be consenting that he visit you in my shape. Now, here wherein you will confer this favour, thus it will be, he will disembody my soul, and set it in paradise, entering himself into my body. And as long as he shall be with you, my soul will be in paradise. Whereto my Lady Slender Wit, So be it, she said. I am well pleased that you have this solace to salve the bruises he gives you on my account. Good, said Fra Alberto, then you will see to it that to-night he find when he comes your outer door unlatched, that he may have ingress, for coming as he will in human shape, he will not be able to enter save by the door. It shall be done, replied the lady. Whereupon Fra Alberto took his leave, and the lady remained in such a state of exultation that her nether and knew not her chemise, and it seemed to her 1,000 years until the angel Gabriel should come to visit her. Friar Alberto, bethinking him that 'twas not as an angel but as a cavalier that he must acquit himself that night, fell to fortifying himself with comfits and other dainties, that he might not lose his saddle for a slight cause. Then, a leave of absence gotten, he betook him at nightfall with a single companion to the house of a woman that was his friend, which house had served on former occasions as his base when he went chasing the fillies, and having there disguised himself, he hied him, when he deemed 'twas time, to the lady of the house, where, donning the gewgaws he had brought with him, he transformed himself into an angel, and going up, entered the lady's chamber. No sooner saw she this dazzling apparition than she fell on her knees before the angel, who gave her his blessing, raised her to her feet, and motioned her to go to bed. She, nothing loath, obeyed forthwith, and the angel lay down beside his devotee. Now, Friar Alberto was a stout, handsome fellow, whose legs bore themselves right bravely, and being bedded with Mona Lisetta, who was lusty and delicate, he covered her after another fashion than her husband had been wont, and took many a flight that night without wings, so that she heartily cried him content. And not a little therewith did he tell her of the glory celestial. Then, towards daybreak, all being ready for his return, he hied him forth, and repaired, caparisoned as he was, to his friend, whom, lest he should be affrighted, sleeping alone, the good woman of the house had solaced with her company. The lady, so soon as she had breakfasted, betook her to Fra Alberto, and reported the angel Gabriel's visit, and what he had told her of the glory of the life eternal, describing his appearance, not without some added marvels of her own invention. Whereto Fra Alberto replied, "Madam, I know not how you fared with him, but this I know, that last night he came to me, and for that I had done his errand with you. He suddenly transported my soul among such a multitude of flowers and roses as was never seen here before, and my soul, what become of my body I know not, tarried in one of the most delightful places that ever was from that hour until matins." "As for your body," said the lady, "do I not tell you whose it was? It lay all night long with the angel Gabriel in my arms. And if you believe me not, you have but to look under your left pap, where I gave the angel a mighty kiss, of which the mark will last for some days." "Why then," said Fra Alberto, "I will even to-day, what 'tis long since I did, to wit, undress, that I might see if you say sooth." So they fooled it a long while, and then the lady went home, where Fra Alberto afterwards paid her many a visit without any let. However, one day it so befell that while Mona Lisetta was with one of her gossips canvassing beauties, being minded to exalt her own charms above all others, and having, as we know, none too much wit in her pumpkin pat, observed, "Did you but know by whom my charms are prized, then, for sure, you would have naught to say of the rest." Her gossip, all agog to hear, for well she knew her foible, answered, "Madam, it may be as you say, but still, while one knows not who he may be, one cannot alter one's mind so rapidly." Whereupon my Lady Featherbrain, Gossip, said she, 'tis not for common talk, but he that I wot of is the angel Gabriel, who loves me more dearly than himself. For that I am, so he tells me, the fairest lady in all the world, ay, and in the Marema to boot. Whereat her gossip would fain have laughed, but held herself in, being minded to hear more from her. Wherefore, she said, God's faith, madam, if 'tis the angel Gabriel, and he tells you so, why, so of course it must needs be. But I wist not the angels meddled with such matters. There you erred, gossip, said the lady. Zounds, he does have it better than my husband, and he tells me they do it above there too. But as he rates my charms above any that are in heaven, he is enamoured of me, and not seldom visits me. So now, dost see? So away went the gossip, so agog to tell the story that it seemed to her 1,000 years till she was where it might be done. And being met for recreation with a great company of ladies, she narrated it all in detail, whereby it passed to the ladies' husbands, and to other ladies, and from them to yet other ladies, so that in less than 2 days all Venice was full of it. But among others, whose ears it reached, were Monna Lisetta's brothers-in-law, who, keeping their own counsel, refused to find this angel and make out whether he knew how to fly, to which end they kept watch for some nights. Whereof no hint, as it happened, reached Friar Alberto's ears, and so, one night, when he was come to enjoy the lady once more, he was scarce undressed, when her brothers-in-law, who had seen him come, were at the door of the room, and already opening it, when Friar Alberto, hearing the noise and apprehending the danger, started up, and having no other resource, threw open a window that looked on to the Grand Canal, and plunged into the water. The depth was great, and he was an expert swimmer, so that he took no hurt, but, having reached the other bank, found a house open, and forthwith entered it, praying the good man that was within, for God's sake, to save his life, and trumping up a story to account for his being there at so late an hour, and stripped to the skin. The good man took pity on him, and having occasion to go out, he put him in his own bed, bidding him stay there until his return, and so, having locked himself in, he went about his business. Now, when the lady's brothers-in-law entered the room, and found that the angel Gabriel had taken flight, leaving his wings behind him, being balked of their prey, they roundly rated the lady, and then, leaving her disconsolate, betook themselves home with the angel's spoils. Whereby it befell that, when 'twas broad day, the good man, being on the Rialto, heard tell how the angel Gabriel had come to pass the night with Monna Lisetta, and, being surprised by her brothers-in-law, had taken fright, and thrown himself into the canal, and none knew what was become of him. The good man guessed in a trice that the said angel was no other than the man he had at home, whom on his return he recognized, and, after much chaffering, brought him to promise him 50 ducats, that he might not be given to the lady's brothers-in-law. The bargain struck, Fra Alberto signified a desire to be going. Whereupon, "There is no way," said the good man, "but one, if you are minded to take it. To-day we hold a revel, wherein folk lead others about in various disguises. As one man will present a bear, another a wild man, and so forth. And then, in the piazza of San Marco, there is a hunt, which done, the revel is ended, and then away they hie him, whither they will, each with the man he has led about. If you are willing to be led by me in one or another of these disguises, before it can get wind that you are here, I can bring you whither you would go. Otherwise, I see not how you are to quit this place without being known, and the lady's brothers-in-law, reckoning that you must be lurking somewhere in this quarter, have set guards all about to take you." Loath indeed was Friar Alberto to go in such a guise, but such was his fear of the lady's relations that he consented, and told the good man whither he desired to be taken, and that he was content to leave the choice of the disguise to him. The good man then smeared him all over with honey, and covered him with down, set a chain on his neck and a vizard on his face, gave him a stout cudgel to carry in one hand, and 2 huge dogs which he had brought from the shambles to lead with the other, and sent a man to the Rialto to announce that whoso would see the angel Gabriel should hie him to the piazza of San Marco, in by the chain behind, and through a great throng that clamoured, "What manner of thing is this? What manner of thing is this?" He brought him to the piazza, where, what with those that followed them, and those that had come from the Rialto on hearing the announcement, there were folk without end. Arrived at the piazza, he fastened his wild man to a column in a high and exposed place, making as if he were minded to wait till the hunt should begin, whereby the flies and gadflies, attracted by the honey with which he was smeared, caused him most grievous distress. However, the good man waited only until the piazza was thronged, and then, making as if he would unchain his wild man, he tore the vizard from Friar Alberto's face, saying, "Gentlemen, as the boar comes not to the hunt, and the hunt does not take place, that it be not for nothing that you are come hither. I am minded to give you a view of the angel Gabriel, who comes down from heavens to earth by night to solace the ladies of Venice." The vizard was no sooner withdrawn than all recognized Friar Alberto, and greeted him with hootings, rating him in language as offensive and opprobrious as ever rogue was abused withal, and pelting him in the face with every sort of filth that came to hand. In which plight they kept him an exceedingly great while, until by chance the bruit thereof reached his brethren, of whom some 6 thereupon put themselves in motion, and, arrived at the piazza, clapped the habit on his back and unchained him, and amid an immense uproar led him off to their convent, where, after languishing a while in prison, 'tis believed that he died. So this man, by reason that, being reputed righteous, he did evil, and 'twas not imputed to him, presumed to counterfeit the angel Gabriel, and, being transformed into a wild man, was in the end put to shame as he deserved, and vainly bewailed his misdeeds. God grant that so it may betide all his likes. End of Day 4, the second story. Recording by Miette of Miette's Bedtime Story Podcast.